All right, now let's do some fan questions.
Hey Chael, Mike from South Jersey here. My question is, in the UFC, who do you think are your top five martial artists when it comes to having tools in the tool shed ready for use?
All right, the top 5 martial artists. Now, did I hear you say in the UFC? I think you said that, but allow me to change it and just make it in martial arts because you have to bring in Demetrius Johnson, right? It wouldn't be right to do a top 5 list and not add Demetrius to it. So let me start with Demetrius, but let me add for you what I personally admire and envy, meaning I wish I had it, in watching Demetrius is his ability to transition. He can not only transition from strikes to grappling, he can transition from strikes to submissions. He can skip over the takedown and go right from punching you in the face to trying to break your arm. He can go from grappling into striking, not just from grappling into a submission, which would be the traditional order, right? From the wrestling to the striking to the submissions, he will mix that order any which way he wants to do. I've just never seen that before from anybody. Then you add the speed and the footwork and the tenacity and the experience and the heart and the toughness and the guy. I like the way he transitions. And if you're talking about a skilled mixed martial artist, you simply can't have this conversation without talking about Demetrius Johnson. Now, I would also have to put, in fairness, and it pains me, I got to put Jon Jones in there. I don't like to give Jon Jones any kind of rub because I can't stand Jon Jones, but I also need to be honest when it comes to Jon. And you talk about a very skilled guy. You know, Jon was just in a dust-up with Dominic Reyes. And Dominic Reyes had said something to the effect to Jon Jones about get ready to take on the next generation. And Jon Jones responded and he said, let's break that down a minute. What exactly is next generation about you? Tell me, what skill do you have that you surmise I haven't seen before or don't possess myself? I mean, I'll admit you're a different name than the previous generations, but that's about it. Now, I have to get Jon an absolute A+ perfect 10 on that response because I also would like the answer. Now, I view Dominic Reyes as the rightful contender. He's more youthful than Jon, which Jon doesn't see all that often. He's got an unblemished record, which is better than Jon's. I mean, he offers something that we don't see all that often. He's absolutely huge, which is generally something that favors Jon. But I would like the answer that Jon asked. I'm also curious that myself. Just exactly what within your skill set is so next generation? Interesting question. Now, I think when you're looking at all-around skilled fighters, you would better give a very good look to Henry Cejudo. I don't know if that answer would have been true 4 years ago. He was pretty wrestling heavy and he was a great competitor. As far as a mixed martial artist, no, not necessarily. He started to become very good with the hands, something he worked on when he was in his youth, but something that he resharpened. And then he got into a little bit of a karate stance, a little bit more of a karate projection, switching stances, showing some footwork, but really showing an evolution there. I think that you'd be very wise to look at his skills and what he brings. And then ultimately, I really think you shouldn't take your eye off of Max Holloway. And I'm answering this question that you asked because you said how many skills in the tool shed. Now, there's always the other side of the coin, which is the one-dimension guy, but his dimension is so sharp and so strong, nobody could be it. Damian Maia used to get credit for that, and I think still does. Khabib gets tremendous credit for that, rightfully so. But I'm answering the question the way that you asked it, with a variety of skills and tools. Who can wrestle with about anybody, strike with about anybody, and play the ground game with about anybody. And I think that would be your top 5. I'll finish that with Max.
You ask us who fights Yoel Romero next. Now, I have a kind of unorthodox answer, and I'm going to go ahead and say it's Edmen Shahbazyan. He's ranked number 10 as a middleweight right now, and he's only 21 years old. And I'm looking at his record right now. It's 11-0. This kid's undefeated at 21. And something else about his record, man, is out of 11 fights, 9 have been by knockout, 1 by submission. And out of all of those, they've all been in the first round. The only fight that hasn't finished in the first round is a decision win over Darren Stewart. Now, this kid he's pretty impressive, and I don't know why no one is talking about him. Now, maybe he doesn't deserve to fight Yoel Romero right now for a title eliminator, but I think people should notice this kid. I think he should be getting some recognition.
All right, I got to tell you, you're saying a lot of things there. You're not saying anything I disagree with, but it would surprise me if Edmund got matched up with Yoel Romero. You finished that with something that I would like to co-sign very strongly, which is that Edmund needs to get his credit. I agree with you on that. And don't forget, he's 21 years old. If you go look at his match with Brad Tavares, it would probably take you a couple of looks because on one hand, you do see it. He catches and hurts Brad. The fight goes for about another 30 seconds, but Brad is not Brad at that point. Brad has been wounded. It is a competitor who's trying to hang in there. Some of the better strikes landed in some of the more impressive highlight reel moments of that fight by Edmund happened when Brad was a wounded duck. So do you take that away from Edmund or do you shine him up? You decide on that one. To your point that he needs a good, strong look in his direction, particularly with his shelf life, I fully agree with you. To match a 21-year-old up with a 43-year-old, I don't know that they would do that. They certainly could. I mean, you're all in the same division. You've all got the same license. Perhaps I'm the one making too much of age, but I don't know if you would do that. And don't forget, look, Yoel Romero is a very hard night out. And Yoel Romero is one of those guys that's called a bracket buster. He will come in the bracket. It doesn't matter if he's the number 8 seed, the number 4 seed, or the number 24 seed. Nobody in the bracket wants to draw him, but somebody has to because everybody knows on any given night he'll shut your lights out. He's just that level of athlete. He's that kind of guy with that kind of explosiveness. I suggest that for you because you have to look at it from a promoter's perspective who isn't looking to shine up the guy. No matter how great of a job he did, you're not looking to shine up the guy who's 43 and whose numbers are limited in comparison to a 21-year-old who's got a decade to a decade and a half left in the business. You have to look at it from that perspective. That's only a small piece of the pie. But it's a piece. And I think it's the part that might separate them. And don't forget, as much as you know who Edmund is and good for you, everybody knows who Yoel is. And to match them up, with the risk that you derail Edmund, I just think it's a little bit risky at this point in terms of the booking. But I will concede to you, I would stop what I was doing. I would watch that.
Hey, Chael, I was wondering, do you think that because Jon didn't look that great against Thiago Santos, it actually works in his favor in terms of promotion for his next fight? Because I think that he's starting to have this, or at least before the Santos fight, he was having this kind of same issue that Roy Jones was having where everyone kind of knew what the outcome was, so he actually wasn't getting as many people to tune in. So do you think actually not looking as great in his last fight in some ways helps him?
Yes! Thank you! And I think that that's pretty obvious to everybody that isn't named Jon Jones, right? Jon Jones, you're never going to get Jon to understand how this business works. And one thing about that, when you have conversations with Jon, how do you convince a guy who's the best at what he does, who's made a jackpot full of money, who's had a lot of fun, that he's doing something wrong? I mean, do you see how that would be a hard thing to do? At the same time, you want to grab him and go, yeah, I understand you made a jackpot. Do you understand how much you left behind? Okay, great. But here's the deal, and you nailed it. As much as it upsets Jon, when you come out and you say, look, Jon isn't going to be the champion for very much longer. As much as that motivates him or even irritates him or pisses him off, good for Jon. If that's what it takes to get him in the right frame of mind and get him in the gym and doing the right things, great, take it and run with it. What you're talking about specifically is the business side. Jon has been playing to venues that are full of people that are dressed up as empty seats, and he can't seem to understand it's only because he hasn't created the imagination in the fans' mind that he could lose. Right, that he could lose. I love your example to Roy Jones. Roy Jones was not only the best boxer in the world, he was the best boxer of the 90s, of a decade. Guys, if you're the best at something for one day, you have done a tremendous job. If you can be the best at something for a month or 3 months or even a year, oh my goodness, are you ever in a rare class? Roy Jones was the best in a very hard field for 10 years. but he never had that mega fight. He didn't live through the era where he had a tremendous and compelling opponent. And even the night that he slipped, nobody knew he was going to slip leading into that, or they would have bought the shot. It just didn't work that way. But it's a great example. It's not a knock on Roy. It's not even a knock on Jon. It's an acknowledgement to your point that to create an imagination in the fan's mind, which is one thing that Jon has not helped with. Jon has not helped. He gets angry if somebody questions him. If you just stood back and go, okay, Jon, you're the best. You stand over here by yourself. Okay, now the rest of you boys, let's all get together and figure out how to do business. I mean, do you see the problem? Do you see how he ends up the odd man out? I agree with you. His performance with Santos, particularly when we were given the information after the fact that Santos is out there on one knee, on one leg, I thought that Santos won that fight. A lot of people were with me. Now, I understand that Jon did more damage and that Jon pressured him and Jon hit him and kicked him and did more. I do understand all of those things, but I also understand something called the 10-9 must system, and I will argue for you that Jon did his damage in 2 rounds and that the other 3 rounds that were really close, I personally thought they went to Thiago. That isn't revisionist history. I'm just adding to your point that the fact that Jon was out there and had a close fight, particularly with a guy who was a wounded duck on one leg, does build something to the imagination that somebody, Dominic Reyes specifically, could be the one to get over. When you factor that in with Dominic's size, with his perfect record, and the fact that he's 3 years younger, I do believe there's enough of a storyline to create an idea. I don't expect Reyes to go off as the favorite. That's not what I'm suggesting for you. I'm just agreeing with the suggestion you made to me that it could be helpful, that Jon did look human. While I thought it was 3 rounds to 2 Santos, the judge thought it was 3 rounds to 2 Jon. Okay, great. We're basically saying the same thing. We had a very close fight. Let's see what happens in the next one.
What's up, Chael? My question is regards to GSP possibly moving down to 155 to face Khabib. The question here is whether or not moving down would give Khabib an advantage. And do you think that the younger, more active fighter should be the one who has to change ways? Should not the guy who's the legend, the elder of the two, be the one dictating the terms of the fight?
Okay, so you lost me a little bit there. Only in this regard, George is the one that picked the weight. Khabib's a 155-pound champion. George has never said, I want to fight Khabib. He has said, I want to fight Khabib for the championship. Okay, now that's relevant because so many people have said, hey, George, if you want to come back, come and fight me. Come fight me over here. Hey, look in this direction. George was pretty specific. I don't really give a damn about the whole thing, but this champ thing's a real thing. Oh, and I happen to be one. And now I'm going to add another piece of hardware, and I'm going to do it at 39 years old. I mean, George was pretty specific in what he wanted to do. I will tell you, yes, I think that's a great fight. And I think that over time, Khabib is showing just how difficult that fight would be. I think if you were to rewind the tape 18 months, George would go off as the favorite. And if you took it back a year ago, they're about even money. And I would predict for you if that fight was announced now that more money would come in Khabib and George would be a slight underdog. I would just also remind you, these guys have very similar skills, and Khabib would represent the smallest guy that George has ever fought. Now, I'm not a big believer in this whole size advantage thing. I've always found size to be a disadvantage, but if we are going to accept as a fight community that Chael is the odd man out and that bigger is better, then we got to accept that for George too. And if he comes down and is the bigger of the fighter and is in there with, at least in theory, the smallest man he's ever faced, which would mean the weakest man he's ever faced, I think that you would need to consider that. And I still think that fight is wildly compelling.
Uncle Jill, there's no bad guy like Uncle Jill. Never lost, not even